2, 1. All right. Okay. Well, happy Friday. And for today, well, okay, I have lecture slides, but before I get into this lecture, and so I want to talk about the final project. Okay. So the final project is going to be due during 10th week, and we'll have like a schedule. And basically, you'll schedule like a 1-hour meeting with me during 10th week, and that's when it's due. So if you schedule it for 10th week Monday, your final project will be 10th week Monday, and then you'll be done, and you don't have to worry about anything else. And then some of you, like, I'll probably have meetings throughout 10th week and 11th week, and if you want to schedule it for like 11th week, probably the last day I'll let you sign up for it would be like 11th week Wednesday or something, and you can schedule it till then. But I want you to start thinking about it, start getting started. So there's going to be kind of a few deadlines to think of. Okay, so I need you to establish your groups, your final project groups, by Friday of next week. Okay, so you have 1 week to figure out who's going to be in your group. I have this group sign-up sheet. I don't know if I'm logged in. Okay, I am. You have to be logged into your UCLA account. And basically, I think I've got slots for 17 groups, and that should accompany. So it should be exactly 4 people. The number of people registered for this class isn't divisible by 4, so there might be like 1 or 2 groups of 3 or 1 or 2 groups of 5, but overall everybody's group should be around 4. And then if you like absolutely need to have 5 or 3 or something, come talk to me, and I'll allow for a waiver or something, but aim for 4, and then type your names in here. Okay. And if you want to be creative, you can rename your group from group 8 to, the investigators or something, whatever, whatever funny, creative, punny name you want to come up with. That's up to you. Or you can stick with the default team name. Okay, and then there's going to be, so let me, what did I write about the final project? Okay, so final project is worth quite a bit, 30% of your thing. And did I write about it in here? I wrote final projects in groups of 4. You'll have to identify a data set that can be used and identify potential research questions. And you'll meet with the professor, me, for a graded project proposal. Okay, and that will take place during week 6. So establish your groups by week 4 Friday. Then you have all of week 5 to try to find some data and come up with some kind of proposal. And then during week 6, I will set up, I'll have a kind of a schedule set up, or I'll let you guys schedule a time to meet with me. We'll probably meet for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and I will ask you questions about your data. But so I'll actually put a rubric up for that. But let me open up the project requirements. Yeah. Yeah, you are finding your own data. Okay, so I can give you some places to look for data, but yeah, you as a group will find some data that is interesting to you. Okay, that someone in your group has to be knowledgeable about. Okay, so this is basically I want you guys to do like sort of a real life data analysis report. Okay, and I want you to kind of develop the skills of being able to look at some data, think of questions to ask from the data, and then go out and search for some of those answers. And maybe you can find answers, maybe you can't. And then also being able to kind of present them with visualizations and explanations and summaries and stuff. Okay, and so out of 300 points, this is kind of the breakdown. 30 points so 10% basically for a project proposal, and then 10% for kind of a presentation, and then the other 80% will be the written report. And as far as the written report goes, the exploratory data analysis is the heaviest, most heavily weighted portion. And I think I added up my points correctly, but if I did something wrong, let me know. Okay. And so, yeah, groups must be established by week 4 Friday, and then, and if you're not, I put not in group by Wednesday week 5. Actually, I'll just do Friday of week 4. I'm going to just throw you into a group. Okay. So I'm going to change this by, if you're not in a group by week 4 Friday, I will put you into a group. Yeah. Question.
For our report, are we expected to make like statistical inferences, like significance tests and stuff?
So there will be a part where you do a little bit of what I wrote, data modeling or prediction, and that's where you can do statistical inferences, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. Right now, we're really, the kind of this beginning content is all like exploratory data analysis, and I think that's probably the most important part, at least in an intro class. And I know like the cool stuff is in the modeling where you do like neural networks and all of that kind of stuff, but that's like that's like trying to fly a fighter jet before you even can ride a bicycle, right? So let's get you being able to even ask the right questions, right? Ask the right questions in exploratory data analysis. So that's the part that's weighted most heavily. Yeah, but yeah. I expect you to do a little bit of it in the report, but it's weighted accordingly. That section where you're doing statistical inference and modeling is only worth 40 points out of the 240 there. So let me talk a little bit about this project proposal meeting, and this might also kind of factor in like as far as like who you want in your group. I mean, probably you don't know too much about your classmates, so you're just going to end up with people most likely like seated kind of close to you. This is just like the default way of finding group members, but you find it however you want. But basically, you're gonna have to find a data set to use, and there's lots of places to look for data. So if you're into sports, there's probably a lot of like websites that have reference data. So if you're into like the NBA, you can go to look up basketball reference, and there's a bunch of like statistics and data for pretty much whatever you want, right? So the NBA season is just about to start, and you can kind of look at I don't know, all kinds of like historical there's so much stuff, right? So you can look at like earlier seasons, and it's got like every single thing against I don't know, lots and lots of stuff, right? So you can kind of look through these things, and there's this is basketball reference, but you have like similar sites for like basically baseball, college football, pro football, hockey, all of these kinds of sites. So if you're into sports, that's a great place. There's also just basically lots of other data. You can go to like the Census Bureau. So you can look up census data, and there's tons of stuff there. There's also there's a website that has lots of data sets, and it's called Kaggle. Okay, and there are data sets here. Now, this is kind of like a place where people can just upload different data sets, and these data sets vary widely in quality. Okay, so sometimes the data is good, but a lot of times the data is bad. So and there's not like there's not a ton of kind of verification of this stuff. So anytime you find a data set, you want to kind of like read through it and ask questions. Does this data set make sense, right? Does the data make sense? And that's going to be an important part when you do, when you have your project proposal meeting. I'm going to ask you kinds of questions. I'm going to look through the data myself, and I'm going to ask you, like, are these reasonable numbers? So an important thing is when you pick a data set, make sure you pick a data set where at least one person, so not all four of you have to be experts on whatever it is, but at least one person in your group needs to feel comfortable with the subject, okay? So kind of a example I use is there's a popular data set on Kaggle, and it's the wine tasting data set or something like that. It's like this wine thing, and they measured all kinds of qualities about the wine. There's like red wines and white wines and stuff, and I'm not against the wine data set, okay? But someone in the group needs to be like knowledgeable about wine. And my suspicion is that most college students are not experts on wine yet, right? So, I imagine a lot of college students are familiar with alcohol, but the finer qualities of what makes a good wine versus a bad wine is or whatever, right? I mean, I don't know, but I don't know if college students can explain the difference between like a Merlot or a Cabernet or a Pinot Noir or something like that, and these are all kinds of what is that, right? So if you can't explain that, or if you don't know that, don't use that data set, right? And it can be anything. The data sets can be anything. I've had students, that was into like League of Legends, and so they found like some League of Legends gameplay data, and they were doing some analysis there. Some people did like a Pokemon data set, and that's also fine. So whatever you're interested in, at least one person in the group should be knowledgeable about it. And I'm going to kind of try to ask questions to kind of check in on that. I guess you don't have to be experts. So there's like some popular housing data sets. Okay, so I think there's like a data set where people explored like house prices in like Seattle and whatnot, which is fine. I don't know if anybody's an expert in Seattle housing prices, but somebody should at least be familiar with like the geography of Seattle or something, in terms of like which neighborhoods, right, in Seattle are expensive, right? So like in LA, if you hear somebody lives in Westwood, you can be like, oh, that's got to be like expensive housing. Westwood, Brentwood, Beverly Hills, those are going to be like expensive areas. And then there's other places, and I don't want to trash talk any other places, but there's places within Los Angeles, these neighborhoods generally have lower housing prices and stuff, and what you might consider to be a good neighborhood and what might be considered a quote unquote bad neighborhood or something. If you've grown up in LA, you're probably familiar about like what areas might be nicer or not as nice and stuff like that. And similarly, if you do find a housing data set, so one of the there's different data sets. There's like an Ames housing data set, which is from Ames, Iowa, which is also fine, but somebody should be familiar with Ames, Iowa. And if nobody knows anything about Ames, Iowa, then it's probably not the best data set to use. You're not forbidden from using it, but I might dock you a few points for lacking that kind of knowledge. Yes, question.
How broad in general should our questions be? Like, should we be asking like, where is the best place to live in Los Angeles, or like what place has the lowest crime rate?
So those are very different questions that basically require very different data sets, right? And then when you say best place to live in Los Angeles,
It's very broad.
that
Subjective.
that is very subjective, right? You would need to define how you define best, right? Does best mean the biggest house you can get for the least amount of money, or does best mean access to good food and shopping? And what do we define as good food? Or does best mean like, nice views of the beach and, I don't know, right? So, and the answer is different for everybody, right? Like, as you guys being college students, the best place to live is probably close to campus, right? Which is not going to be the same answer for a lot of other people. So that's probably not the kind of question you want to go for. If you have a data set on housing, you might want to know like, what factors are correlated to house prices, or you could be like, what factors make a neighborhood more expensive or less expensive, right? And you might uncover some troubling information about, some bad policies and stuff that were implemented historically and stuff. So these are kind of some of the things that data can kind of reveal. Not the data itself, like in terms of like uncovering troublesome policies that were implemented. The data itself won't reveal that, but what it will show is like, hey, this is a neighborhood that, for whatever reason, is priced way lower than what we think it should be or something. And then you delve into a little bit more and you're like, oh, well, it's because of this or that, and you might find information like that. But yeah.
What's generally the process of like pulling the data from this website? Is it like copy and paste or like CSV?
Usually, so a lot of data websites will have a download button. So you can often click. So on Kaggle, you'll have to create an account, but you'll have like a download place. Yeah, if you do census. If you do any of that sports reference stuff, there's going to be a place where you can export or download a CSV. Most of the government places will have some kind of download option. A lot of it might be in some different format where you have to kind of convert it to a format that can be read into R, or you'll have to load some kind of package so you can load in data into R, and we'll cover that next week, data ingest, getting data in. Yeah, there's lots of places out there, so, start kind of exploring, figure out who you want in your group, talk about what kinds of things you guys are interested in, and start looking at different data sets and just start asking beginning questions. And the questions that you should ask in the beginning is this data set reliable, and what kind of information is contained in it? So one thing that people or students often find, in Kaggle, you find some kind of like movies data set, like there's like the IMDb something, right? Which I'm not anti, okay? But it becomes difficult in terms of like what kind of questions can I answer with this? So let me, this is kind of, a lot of students are interested and often look at this data set, but then after the project proposal, a lot of students kind of change their mind about working on this data, okay? And so let me kind of explain what makes this data difficult to work with, okay? And it's not in of itself a bad data set. It's just there's not a ton of information that that is going to be easy to work with, okay? So this is the IMDb top 1,000, and I think if you just go to imdb.com, oh gosh, what? All right, I don't know how to use. I don't know how to use this website. Okay. All right. Well, here's the top 250 movies. Okay. All right. So I think this is just from, they just went to movies, top 250 movies, and then The Shawshank Redemption 9.2, The Godfather 9.2, The Dark Knight 9.0, and I think so when this data was scraped, it was just a little bit slightly different. It was a 9.3, a 9.2, and a 9, and stuff like that. Okay. So this is so I think this data set just kind of scraped the information off of this thing. Maybe a couple of things have changed from the time they scraped it and this thing. So what's inside this data set? They have a link to the poster. All right. So if you put this link in here, there's the image of the poster. Okay, which there's not much you can do with this, right? Okay. The title, fine. Okay. When it was released, the certificate, I think, is the rating, and it's, I don't know which. So in the United States, if there's like if it's not for kids, we rate it R, and then if it's kids, it's G or PG, and something in between is PG-13. But it's the rating system's different in each country, and I don't know, where do we find the I think that's what certificate is.
It was at the top, 94, rated R.
Oh, rated R here. Okay. So, but I don't know what U. Okay, I don't know.
Definitely is because underneath it's PG-13.
Yeah, there's PG-13.
That's all I know.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I mean, I don't know what nation uses A, and UA, and I don't even know what that means. I'm guessing A for adults or grown-ups, but in the United States, adult means something else. And okay, but anyway, and then you've got the runtime, and then you have the genre, drama, crime, action, crime, drama. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly where this is coming from either. So let's see. The Shawshank Redemption. It's coming from somewhere. I don't know where on the website this is coming from. Because, like, it makes sense, but it's also like, why is the Shawshank? Is there like a crime in? I don't know. Like, I don't know how the drama genres are even picked in the first place. So it's got to be somewhere on the website. Okay, and then there's a rating. There's the overview, which is which is a big text field, right? And you just, in our class, we're not going to learn how to do text analysis. If this was like a text processing class, sure, but it's a little bit too advanced to start talking about like analyzing text and extracting meaning from text, okay? So it's going to be difficult to work with this column. There is the Metascore, the director, and then some of the stars, okay? So, Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman, et cetera, the number of votes, and I think this is the gross from the movie. I don't know, like box office? Okay, and so you start asking, like, what kind of questions can I work with, or what variables do I have to work with? And I don't know, what do you think? You have the rating, okay, and then you might be like, okay, well, is rating related to gross? And you can start to explore that. And one issue that you're going to run into is that, well, this is the top 1,000 ratings, okay, and so you're already kind of limiting yourself to only movies that have high ratings, right? And if you really wanted to establish, is there a relationship between ratings and how much a movie makes, you need to get like a wide spectrum of ratings. You can't just look at the top, right? Because it's kind of like asking, is there a correlation between height and basketball playing ability? And the answer is obviously yes, right? Obviously, yes. But if you look at the NBA players only, is there a correlation between height and basketball playing ability? The answer is going to be, well, when you're looking at NBA players only, the answer is no. Okay? Everybody's tall. Okay? Just about everybody's tall, and who's a better player or not is no longer correlated to height. But in the general population, yes, absolutely, being tall is an advantage towards playing basketball, okay? And so a data set like this, where we're only looking at the top 1,000 movies, okay, or the top highest rated movies, now it's basically asking like, oh, are we gonna find a relationship between rating and box office? And the answer is, if there is a relationship, it's going to be hard to detect in a data set like this, okay? So that already kind of throws things off, right? What about release year and what kind of stuff, right? Is there a relationship between runtime and rating, or, and then you start realizing, you know what? It's going to be difficult to find relationships. And you might be like, okay, well, what about actors? Are there like certain actors more popular and stuff? And then you realize, oh, you know what? This is really hard because there's so many different actors, and you might try to like do something and be like, okay, these actors show up in a lot of like top-rated movies, but it's also like, it's going to be tough, right? Because you have these things, you have these franchises, right? Like the Lord of the Rings franchise. And so, you're like, oh, Elijah Wood, he's in so many top-rated movies. It's like, he was just in the Lord of the Rings franchises, but it counts as like 3 of these movies, right? Stuff like that. So, I don't know. So I think after kind of, and you should be able to kind of explore some early things, and within like maybe within 1 day of trying to just work with the thing, you should realize, oh, you know what? It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to find kind of interesting relationships within a data set like this. So I'm not anti any kind of movies data set, but you'll probably need a little bit more, some more variables here, and ones that are like less text-based, okay? I will, to kind of help you, I will post some example projects that students did well, and one of them worked with like a Netflix data set, and I think they managed to do something interesting with the Netflix data, despite it, at initial glance, it's kind of tough to work with. They did a lot with kind of the genre column and stuff to find. Okay, so start looking out there for different data sets and start asking questions. Okay, so I'm gonna create a post on CampusWire, I think. So I called this the final project group finder thread. How do I say this? Okay, maybe we'll just call this project group finder thread. Okay, and you'll answer this to start looking for teammates if you want. How do I? We'll send an email out to everybody. Post to everyone. Question, final project. Okay, and then you can click this link, and you can start putting in your teammates' names, your name and your teammates' names. Okay, and then just start exploring what data sets to look at. Okay, let me go back to this, and I put in here a little bit more about the project proposal. So we'll have a meeting And the purpose of the meeting is to establish that the data can be analyzed, is an appropriate data set, and that the scope of the project is appropriate. So you can use almost any data set that you can find. I do have a minimum number of observations, and that's 40. You need to have at least 40 observations. Ideal number is probably a few hundred to a few thousand. You are allowed to work with a much larger data set, say something over 100,000 records, but there's no bonus for working with a really big data set. And working with a very big data set can make things more difficult, especially like it could make your computer crash type of thing. Okay, so there's nothing like if you want to work with a big data set, like you find something super interesting and you want to work with it, that's fine. You can also you can start with a big data set and you can just say, you know what, let's filter it down to these years or these categories and work with a smaller thing that's a little bit easier to work with. That's also fine. And you need to be able to either provide a copy or some kind of link to the data. I wrote, you're required to pick data at least one person is knowledgeable about. This is important. The data must be real data, not a simulated data set. So sometimes out on the web, on Kaggle, there are different data sets that are simulated, and you can't use that. Okay, it's got to be something real. Read through the data description to make sure it is not simulated. And that's an important thing. You have to know where your data is ultimately coming from, okay? You have to be able to explain how the values in the data were obtained, when the data was obtained, who obtained the data. If it's historical data, okay, somebody should be a little bit aware of historically what, how things might have been a little bit different, historically, right? So if you look at, so this is, a silly example, but if you look at kind of historical records in terms of population and stuff, in certain places, only adult men were counted as part of the population, right? That's in certain kind of historical records, as far as, or it'd just be people who were part of the military or had were capable of carrying arms or something. So different. If you're looking at something historical, you need to have that kind of historical context there. Okay. What did I write? Students should know if the data was obtained via scraping the web or if they were reported by an agency, and are they self-reported or were they measured? Okay. So another example is, I think OkCupid or something, some dating website released data, and one of the columns was the person's weight, right? And or I don't know, maybe that's not even a column on OkCupid, but you have to imagine if there's a dating website releases information and it includes the person's weight, versus you got medical records from a hospital and it includes a person's weight, do both of them carry the same accuracy? All right, and the hospital, we assume they're measured by somebody standing on a scale, and then the dating website, probably it's self-reported, right? And is there going to be a difference between those kinds of things, right? There's the U.S. News, college rankings and stuff, and UCLA takes a lot of pride in it because we've been doing well in the rankings and stuff. But then, there's a scandal because, what was it, Columbia or something? Yeah. Then when they self-reported some of these numbers to the thing, it was they were doing something to try to game their rankings, and then they were that was a bit of a scandal or something. So those are kinds of the things to keep in mind, okay? And you need to be able to explain the numbers. So here's a data set is like the graduate admissions data. And let me kind of show you this. So this is, again, some people thought this was interesting, but then when I asked questions, so it had stuff like the person's GRE score, their TOEFL score, the university rating, which I'm not sure what this means, university rating out of 5. And so I don't know, is this like the university that they're applying to is rated 5, or the university that they're coming from is rated 5 or something? I couldn't tell from the data set, okay? During the application for master's programs, right? And then statement of purpose, recommendation strength, statement of purpose and letter of recommendation strength. Who's coming up with these ratings, right? So statement of purpose rating out of 5, undergraduate GPA out of 10, letter of recommendation strength out of 5. I don't know who's coming up with that. Research experience, yes or no. And then chance of admit, 0.92, 0.76, or 0.72. And so my question was, who came up with this chance of admission, right? How did like when we have a student, how do we know this student's chances of admissions are 0.92, right? Because what happens is either the student is admitted or rejected. So if we're talking about an individual student, there's not really a chance of admission. It's like the student got accepted or the student got rejected. So I don't know. So I just asked questions like, how did this number, who came up with this number, or where did this number come from? How did we figure this out? And the groups that proposed using this, they were not able to answer that. And I tried to look, and I could not figure this out. Okay, so just from this kind of the description, the description of this data, I was not able to answer, what I thought were important questions, like especially if this is the response variable that students are going to try to predict, or this is the one that we're like looking for relationships, like, a reasonable question, is GRE score related to chance of admission? Okay, sure. Or is GPA related to chance of admission? That's a very reasonable question to ask, but how do we even know what the chance of admission is in the first place, right? So these are some of the questions that you need to be asking when you're looking at data. And that's what we have there. Okay, does that kind of make sense as far as like what I'm looking for, the kinds of questions I want you to start asking, and being a little bit skeptical regarding the data? And I don't want you to be so skeptical that you're like, oh, this data set's bad, and that data set's bad, and that data set's bad, and everything is bad. That's not the point. But I do want you to ask questions like, can I explain or understand where this number is coming from, right? If you're getting data from some government agency, okay, it's probably more reliable, but also just like, we also kind of just accept things, and they say, oh, the inflation number is, 8.2%. And you're like, okay, that sucks, but like, how is that number calculated, right? So some of these questions that you should be asking, right? So I think you can look up, consumer price index and stuff, and consumer price index data. I think this is from Bureau BLS, yeah. Okay, so you can go. So this is, if you see .gov, it'll be run by the U.S. government, and you can expect there to be pretty accurate information here, and with a little bit of digging, you can probably find out exactly where some of these numbers are coming from. But yeah, I want you to ask these questions, like where is this data coming from? You need to ask, what kind of questions, what kind of projects and stuff can we do? Okay, I've got more on like the written report, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, when it comes to, I'll also post. Yeah, I guess this weekend what I'll do is I'll post some example projects that were good, and I'll also post a rubric for what how I'm going to be grading the project proposal. So so this week, start looking at data, figure out your groups, and then figure out what data set you want to work with before week 6. It might not be a bad idea to have like a backup data set in mind too, because depending on how your project proposal goes, I might poke some holes into it, and you might want to change your data set. Okay, but any questions on that? We spent like the whole time talking about this. It's important though. It's important for your project proposal. I want to make sure you guys pick a good data set. All right, let's just give you all 3 view quiz answers, and then and then I guess I'll push tidy data until next week, and then maybe I'll just answer a few more questions about the data. Okay, so the view quiz answers today are E, B, and A. So elephant, bear, avocado. I don't know. E, B, and A. Elephant, bear, apple. Okay. Any other questions, I guess, about the project? Yeah.
Could we create our own unique data set by joining one online data set with another?
Absolutely, yes. So you can, if you find multiple data sources related to the same kind of subject, and you have a reasonable way to kind of unite them together, yes, you can do that. So, so actually, I did something similar for a different class. I took demographic information from the census, and I joined it up with election data from whatever election place, and I was able to kind of join, at least based on county level information. There was an exception though. In Alaska, the way they run their elections, they don't run it based on county. They run it based on some district thing, and it doesn't align with their county information. So I had to throw Alaska out of the data set because I couldn't tie their thing together. But in the other 49 states, I had election data based on county level election data, and I had census demographic information based on the county, and I was able to kind of tie those two together. So yes, you can do stuff like that to kind of get at some interesting questions there. So yes, yeah. Another question.
In terms of the actual graphs that we'll be including in our report.
Yeah.
Would you like us to include like a variety of like different graphs, or do you have any requirements regarding that?
Yeah. So I guess I'll give you more information. I have like just one example of. In the project requirements and guidelines, I have like an example of a histogram, and I think the important thing whenever you include a graph is that you provide some context and explanation. And so if you just say, "Oh, here's the histogram is unimodal, right skewed," that's going to net you 0 points there. Okay, that's not adequate. All right, that's like, but in the context of the thing, you might be able to do something. So. I think the most interesting questions that I want you guys to ask is there a relationship between this variable and this other variable, okay? And first you might want to ask, when we're looking at one variable, so when you're looking at a histogram, when you're looking at one variable, like when does something become an outlier? That's always kind of an interesting thing, and who are these outliers in my data? And if you're able to kind of track that down, that could be interesting. And then the other thing that I think is interesting is, what kind of relationship exists, or does a relationship exist between a couple variables? And so a different group project, they were looking at like housing data in Los Angeles, and they asked, and they uncovered kind of an interesting relationship. And it was, in general, the value of a home goes up with if there's a pool. Okay, the value of a home goes up if there's a pool. All right, that's reasonable. But then they also looked at a zip, kind of by zip codes and regions, and there's a region in Los Angeles where the value of having a pool is actually associated with a decrease in home value. can you imagine where this might be? Having a pool is related to a decrease in home value. Near the beach. They kind of uncovered this where houses near the beach, if you were in the zip code that was right along the beach, then having a pool meant you weren't right next to the beach, okay? Because you weren't right next to the beach, and so those houses were lower value than the houses that didn't have pools, which were right along the beachfront, and those had higher values. And I thought that was a very interesting kind of relationship that they uncovered in the data. So those are the kinds of questions I want you guys to be thinking about, like, okay, is this related to that thing? And not necessarily like a cause and effect, but is there kind of a correlation between these things? And those are the kinds of things I want you to start looking at and looking for. And yeah, so go out there, just kind of see what kind of data is out there, figure out who you want to work with in a group. And if you can't find teammates, I'm going to just kind of assign you. But so you have until 4th week Friday to find a group of 4, and then you'll have all of 5th week to kind of meet with your group to try to figure out what data sets you want to work with, and the 6th week we'll have your proposal meetings. Okay, well, have a great weekend. We'll end here for now, and then I'll just I'll go over the lecture that I had here. We'll save that for next week. All right, we'll see ya Monday.